Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition, and today we're going to talk about collapsing timelines, what collapses timelines the fastest, and what will start happening when you collapse timelines. And this kind of goes back into the quantum jumping video I did a couple weeks ago or last week, I don't remember, about what happens when you start moving through realities at a quicker clip, because we have the ability to do that. Now, sometimes we do it intentionally. Sometimes we kind of push a domino over and it starts us into something else and we didn't really realize we did it. But it gives us that ability to bust through realities quicker. And the bigger fear you jump through is the bigger your jump's going to be. So jumping through your fears, that is going to be what's going to propel you forward into these jumps. And the bigger your fear, the bigger the jump. So look at what you don't want to do, what you have the biggest fear about, and that's what's going to propel you the quickest. Whereas in our human realities, we would kind of do it slower. You know, we work through our fears in a different manner, or we kind of try to ignore them until a lot of stuff happened and it kind of collapsed down on top of us in a sense. And we didn't proactively jump through the fear, whatever that fear is. And we're going to have a lot of different fears we didn't even really know we had. But the more you jump through them, you're going to then start jumping through realities quicker. Now, what you're going to find, and what I found when I did my latest jump, when I sold my car, and I had a lot of fear over selling the car, sold the car, and I had all this other stuff that kind of happened after that. And what started to make more sense to me, not when I was in the middle of it, because when you're in the middle of it, you don't know what's going on. You only see a piece of it. But when I kind of started getting to the other side of the jump, I understood that everything that was tied up in the frequency of that vehicle, and this is when it gets, I want to also go in a little bit in this video about trying to align a human reality or an older reality that was built on our human consciousness and trying to align that to higher consciousness or starting over and only bringing in things, letting all that stuff go and bring in things that are aligned. Because I've done a lot of videos on both. You know, you can try to align it, you can just let it go. I have found, honestly, it's easier to just bring in stuff that is aligned instead of trying to take something that's not aligned and realign it. I found it's much easier to just kind of start over in a sense, because you're already starting at a set point where it's already aligned, because you're only bringing in stuff that's aligned. You're not playing in the stuff that's not. And now, especially when you're talking about people, because you have all that obligation energy around letting people go, especially people who've been with us for a long time, you know, and over linear time, through a lot of our experiences, through a lot of our moments. You know, you don't really want to let these people go. Trying to align them on a soul level and aligning the relationship, which is basically what you're doing when you're aligning, when you're talking about people, you're aligning the relationship to a higher consciousness reality. You're aligning the reality to that. And when you get tied to people, anything attached to them, so when you talk about bringing people in or bringing people over and trying to align them, understanding that every decision they make is everything they're outputting into their field is creating a feedback loop for them. Just like whatever we put out, it creates a feedback loop for us. The more conscious you become, the more you become very aware of what you're putting out, what you're creating, what your energy is creating, what your thoughts are creating, what you're doing. And when we're in our human consciousness, we don't know what we're doing, okay? We're like little kids playing with fire. We don't know what we're doing. Once you know what you're doing, you don't have that excuse anymore. And things come back around and hit you a lot harder quicker, because you don't have the excuse of, oh, I didn't know. You know, oh, I knew, I just didn't want to do it that way. You know, I wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it, the way my human wanted to do it. I didn't want to do it the soul aligned way. Even though it might feel like the longer way, in the end, it will be the quicker way. Because the other ways are kind of, they seem quicker, but they're dead ends at the end. It's kind of like you're going on a lot of roads that look faster. Oh, that's a shortcut. But when you go down that road, you know it's a dead end. You got to come all the way back and start over. And that's a lot of our human realities were like that. It looks quicker. It looks faster, but it's not. So you kind of are going to get to these points where you have to look. Do I want to keep this person in my reality, knowing what they're creating? Because you're not tied to that. You're tied to their realities when you bring them in. So you're going to go through their karmic retribution if you want to call it that. I really don't like that word, but that's the word I got, so we're going to use it today. Don't usually use the word retribution, but you're going to go through that with them because you're tied to them. You're tied to the realities they're creating. And if they're not going, if they're in a different part of their awakening or ascension process or pre-awakening, pre-ascension, and you're in a different phase, it's a lot tougher to bring these people through because we can't really drag them through, and they're going to have to go at their own organic pace anyway. You can't rush anybody through. It doesn't work that way. Yes, you're going to activate their field being around them, but if you're not at a place to hold your field when someone else is spinning at a different rate, which takes a lot of time and a lot of mastery to be able to do that, it just might not be possible. So in my experience, it's easier to sort of let those things, and they will kind of organically go over time because all these people are aspects of us. And when you get into things that we would look at, it doesn't, in our human, we would think it was a house, in our human consciousness, we would say it doesn't have a consciousness. Everything has a consciousness. The car has a consciousness. The house has a consciousness. The couch has a consciousness. You just can't feel it yet. Dirt has a consciousness. You can feel every piece of the house. You can feel every part of everything. So you start to see that some things just aren't aligned and you don't know why. I knew something was up with the car. I knew it had to go. I didn't know what it was so much until it was gone. And then all these things started happening that I was like, everything came at me at once. All these realities I did not want to activate started activating. And I'm like, oh, hold the phone. What the fuck is going on? What did I do? But what had happened was that car had a certain frequency it represented, right? It was a certain frequency attached to that car. It was bought in my human realities. I didn't appreciate it. I didn't have a connection with it. So anything of that frequency that matched the frequency of those realities, a lack reality, a fear reality, there was a lot of fear around that car. So anything I feared started happening because I had to bust through all those fears too, right? It wasn't just one thing. I had to bust through anything that was that same frequency. Also had to go to clear the frequency from my timeline to get out of that timeline. I had to clear everything that was that frequency. That's why it feels like everything comes at you at once. Because once you make that jump, you bust through that fear, anything still there that's going to activate that is going to come at you. Anything that's in that old frequency, any of these old things you haven't tied up yet, it's going to have to come at you so you can then phase it on, deal with it, and then move on. So anything of that frequency has to go. And then I looked, I'm like, okay, now I've got all this stuff I have to deal with, not only just the whole vehicle thing, I'll deal with all this stuff. And I went out and bought an older SUV, which kind of felt like what I wanted. And I didn't pay very much for it in a human sense, a couple thousand. Had to spend a lot of money to get it fixed up, but that's what I felt like was aligned to do. So that's what I did. A lot of money to fix it. But I had the money, so that's what I was supposed to do. And I spent a lot of time, hours cleaning this car and getting the vibration up because the vibration was so low in the car because it had been so neglected in a sense that I had to get the vibration up. I could not set in that vehicle because the vibration was not going to support me. And then I realized that my old car, the vibration just was not what it needed to be to support my new phase. That's why I never wanted to be in the car before, because it didn't support me. It was pulling because it was too much around it. And you really don't see that when you're in it. You have to be able to pull out of those realities, and you can look and kind of see what had gone on, what had happened, how everything that was tied to that reality, even though the stuff that came out of busting through that fear of selling the vehicle and getting rid of it, getting it out of my field, all the stuff that came after it, they don't seem correlated. Like none of these things seem to be anywhere near attached to the car from a linear view, but they are from an energetic. The energy was similar. The fear was there. There were all these things that were full of still being in that control of the human reality. The fear of leaving that reality behind, when you're not intimidated anymore by the human realities, the threats of the human reality, then the spell is kind of broken of the human reality. You don't believe it anymore. It becomes kind of a joke reality. You're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just, there's a while where you're going to kind of try to it'll try to entice you back with money or love or whatever it is you would always be your catch point to go back. And when that stuff stops working, you'll find it kind of moves into threatening kind of thing, in a sense, where you perceive as a threat, and a lot of fear will come up over this stuff or that stuff. But when you left these realities, the things that might feel like a threat now will come back to kind of pull you back in. Oh, if you don't do this, then we're going to do this, or whatever it is. So you're going to see that kind of shift, but it's all kind of trying to pull you back in, and to see if you're going to just say, okay, but the minute we stop feeling that threat, right, then it's not a threat anymore. Because a threat is only a threat if we believe it is. It's our belief around it. That's the thing. It's not only about the threat. It's the belief that we have around the threat that can affect us in any way. So it was just interesting to move all that stuff out and see all the stuff that was tied to it energetically. And this is kind of how we learn, and how we see how everything's kind of connected together, and how it kind of was holding us in a reality. And then when I got my new vehicle, I spent 14 hours cleaning her. She needed it over 5 days, because I could not put out that much energy at one time, not that much physical energy at one time. Really merging with her in a sense in the fields, and really feeling, the energy of her, of the vehicle. And I had such a deep appreciation for the vehicle, beyond anything I'd ever done before, because in our human realities, we tie appreciation to money. The more we pay for something, the more we kind of value it and appreciate it. And if you don't pay a lot, you don't really do that. And in our higher realities, it's different, because everything is valued. Everything has a purpose. Everything is important to us. So I felt more connection and more love and more appreciation for that vehicle. And I paid a pittance for what I had paid for my other car. 2% of it. But it was such a deeper connection with it, because I was a deeper connected with myself. So I could feel that deep connection with something else. Whereas I couldn't feel that with that vehicle. And there was so much around it. And I didn't even see all that at the time, that I that much wrapped around it. And it represented something to me that had to go and had to move out. So when you start moving through your biggest fears, you're going to activate these jumps, these timeline collapses, these timeline jumps. And you're going to see a lot of stuff come at you that don't seem related. And at the time, you might not even put it together, that you hit one domino and the whole shit fell. Or if you go back and fear's like a house of cards, right? Can't hurt you if it falls, but you flick out one card and then all this shit just kind of comes down and you're like, what did I do? You're just trying to clear it out of your field. And that's what you did. So anything of that similar frequency is going to come back, so you can clear that too, because you're trying to get it away from you. Clear it from your field, because it's anchoring you into the lower, that different timeline, and you want to jump to a new timeline. So that is what you're doing, or one of the million things you're doing. So, okay, good luck, and keep practicing the art of intuition.